Hey everyone, and welcome to the follow-up video to my alternate history series on what if Scandinavia united in the 1800s. If you haven't watched part 1, there's a link to it in the description. The United Kingdoms of Scandinavia and Finland, or just Scandinavia as it's referred to colloquially, is a constitutional monarchy, officially with the royal family as heads of state. In practice, it is of course a democracy, with its main parliament in Gothenburg, as well as secondary parliaments in the autonomous regions of Finland, Greenland, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and the Scandinavian West Indies. The United Kingdoms of Scandinavia and Finland has a population of just over 28 million, making it the 6th most populated country in the European Union. In terms of population, there are some notable differences from our world. Due to Scandinavia politically being one entity and them having a common immigration policy, population growth in recent decades would have happened differently. A similar amount of immigrants would arrive in the region compared to in our world, perhaps slightly fewer due to Denmark, Norway, and Finland having a slightly less open immigration policy than Sweden. Regardless, these more recent immigrants would in this world be distributed more evenly across the Nordics rather than being overly concentrated in Sweden like in our world. This results in Sweden having a noticeably smaller population, with the rest of the constituent countries having slightly higher population sizes. Of course, Finland and Denmark's extra territory also contribute to their even larger populations compared to the real world. So, with that in mind, let's move on to specifics about these constituent countries of the United Kingdoms. The largest constituent country by population is Sweden. It has a population of almost 9.2 million and is home to the capital of Scandinavia, Gothenburg, as well as other important centers like Stockholm and Malmö. Malmö, along with the Skåneland region in the south of Sweden, is sort of a cultural bridge between Denmark and Sweden, something which is very apparent when looking at the local dialects that I'll cover later in this video. Skåneland is also quite a unique region scenery-wise, as it's much more like Denmark in that most of the forests have been replaced by farmland. In Sweden, like most of the United Kingdoms except for Denmark, is relatively sparsely populated. The population centers are mostly concentrated in the aforementioned Skåneland region, along with Västergötland, Östergötland, and Svealand. The northern region of Norrland, meanwhile, consists mostly of wilderness, with a few notable towns like Sundsvall, Östersund, Umeå, and Luleå. All of these regions, apart from Skåneland, are for the most part covered in vast forests, with Norrland of course having the least urban settlements. The second most populous constituent country in the United Kingdoms is Denmark. It has a population of just over 6.7 million, roughly 75% that of Sweden, and is home to the largest metropolitan area in the United Kingdoms, Copenhagen, which along with Malmö in Sweden creates the even larger Øresund metropolitan area. Denmark is also home to other important cities like Aarhus, Odense, Aalborg, and Flensborg. Compared to the rest of the kingdom, Denmark is very densely populated and urban. It's also the largest food producer in the kingdom and is for that reason of key importance. While most of the country is flat and a mix of fields and urban areas, particularly in the Sjælland and Fyn regions, Sønderjylland does have some beautiful beaches and low-lying islands along its western coast. You will also find that Nørrejylland is quite a bit more hilly than the rest of the country, being home to the highest point in Denmark, Møllehøj. Bornholm, on the other hand, is a much more unique region. It's a small island separated from the rest of Denmark, with many unique cliff formations not found anywhere else in Denmark. The third most populous constituent country in the United Kingdoms, and largest by area, not including territories, is Finland. Its population is around 6.1 million, a bit behind Denmark despite the size difference. Finland, unlike the other constituent countries of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, has autonomous status within the United Kingdoms. This means that Finland acts as an independent country in many ways, having its own parliament in Helsinki and its own local laws. But it does share a common military, foreign policy, and currency with the rest of Scandinavia. Finland does also participate in the Scandinavian parliament, despite having its own local parliament. One thing Finland is particularly known for is its lakes and forests, which cover pretty much every region of the country, particularly the Hemi-Savo and Karelia regions. Most of the population of Finland is concentrated around these lakes and the coast in the south. The densest regions are the Uusimaa and Vaasina-Suomi or Southwest Finland regions. Here you'll also find some of the more important cities like Helsinki and Turku. The rest of the country, such as in Karelia and Lappi or Lapland, is very sparsely populated and gets incredibly cold during the winter, which is partially why so few live there. The fourth most populous constituent country is Norway. It has a population of 5.7 million and is renowned for its natural beauty, as much of the country is covered with mountains, and its coastline is jagged, with countless fjords making their way far inland. Norway also owns important oil reserves in the North Sea, vital to the Norwegian economy. Norway, much like Sweden and Finland, has most of its population concentrated in its warmer and more hospitable southern regions along the coast. These more populated regions are Østlandet, Sørlandet, and Vestlandet. Here you will find the most important cities of Oslo and Bergen. Trøndelag and Hålogaland are in some ways a similar story to Norrland in Sweden, in that they're very sparse, although unlike Norrland, they are much more based around the sea, as the northern Norwegian regions don't reach very far inland. It's also a lot more mountainous than Norrland. The least populous constituent country, not including territories, is Iceland. Iceland has a population of 341,000. It's one of the busiest tourist hotspots in the United Kingdoms and is renowned for its natural beauty. What makes Iceland so unique is that it's geologically active. This means that you can find natural hot springs, active volcanoes, and geysers all across the country. Worth mentioning is also that it is incredibly sparsely populated. A whole 64% of the population living in Iceland live in just the capital region, which includes Reykjavik and some of the surrounding minor towns. Much like Finland, Iceland has autonomous status, meaning it is a part of the United Kingdoms, but has its own local parliament which addresses local matters. Iceland also has a bit of a unique history compared to mainland Scandinavia. Iceland actually left the United Kingdoms during the Second World War, when the kingdom was forcefully made a part of the German Axis. Here British soldiers were present and protected the now independent Iceland, but when the war was over, there was quite a bit of discussion on what to do. The people of Iceland had gotten used to local rule, but being a part of a larger nation also had its benefits. And this is actually how Iceland ended up with autonomous status and a local parliament, as the United Kingdoms of Scandinavia and Finland offered Iceland autonomous status if it were to rejoin. Worth mentioning is also the United Kingdom's autonomous territories. The Faroe Islands are a small territory located between Britain and Norway. They have a population of roughly 50,000 and are home to some beautiful natural scenery. Although not very many live on the Faroe Islands, they still have their own local parliament in Tórshavn. Greenland is the United Kingdom's largest possession, located in North America. Greenland also has a population of roughly 50,000, despite the massive size difference. This is mostly because it's almost completely covered by a giant ice sheet, leaving only small areas of coastline habitable. Of course, Greenland has its own parliament as well, located in Nuuk or Godthåb. The final Scandinavian territory is the Scandinavian West Indies, or Scandinavian Virgin Islands. They're located in the Caribbean and are home to over 100,000 people. The local population is quite diverse, with both Scandinavian, English, Dutch, French, and Spanish being spoken there. These islands are a popular holiday getaway for many Scandinavians, as well as other Europeans and Americans. The Scandinavian West Indies have their own parliament located in the largest town on the island, Charlotte Amalie. Now let's move on to the cities or metropolitan areas of the United Kingdoms. The largest metropolitan area in Scandinavia is the Øresund region. The Øresund region is essentially just the Copenhagen metropolitan area in Denmark and Greater Malmö in Sweden combined. The cities are right next to each other on opposite ends of the sound, and many commute across every day, making it essentially one continuous metropolitan area. If you count the cities as separate, the largest metropolitan area would still be the capital and largest city in Denmark, Copenhagen, but it's pretty much tied with the second largest metropolitan area and capital of Sweden, Stockholm. After that, the largest metropolitan areas are Oslo, the largest city and capital of Norway, then Helsinki, the largest city in and capital of Finland, Gothenburg, the capital of the United Kingdoms of Scandinavia and Finland, and home to the Scandinavian Parliament, Malmö, if you don't count it as a part of the larger Øresund region, then Aarhus, the second largest Danish city located on the mainland in Jutland, Tampere, the second largest city in Finland, and finally Bergen, the second largest city in Norway. Now we'll take a look at the languages in the United Kingdoms of Scandinavia and Finland. The most widely spoken language in the United Kingdoms is of course Scandinavian. Scandinavian is a mix of the old Danish, Swedish, and Norwegian languages that compromised between the three when it came to writing. For instance, the Danish and Norwegian e and ö are used in writing for the most part, but the Swedish e and ö are still used in some, but not all city and town names. Much like how two a's representing ö is still used in some Danish town names. Although Scandinavian is a single language, much like with German, pronunciation varies a lot. Gothenburg and to a lesser extent Oslo Scandinavian are generally used as standards as they are the most easily understood by all Scandinavians. The southern dialects in Denmark, Skåne, Blekinge, and Småland are the biggest outliers when it comes to pronunciation, but as those quote outlier southern dialects are spoken by a plurality of Scandinavians, and in the largest metropolitan area, many are exposed to them, so they are generally understood by other Scandinavians. Worth mentioning is also the specific differences from our world. In this scenario, Skåneland and Småland act as sort of a transition region between the more Swedish and more Danish dialects. It can be argued that this is the case in the real world as well, but in this alternate scenario it's a lot more obvious. Dialects in western Skåne right by Denmark would be more similar to Danish dialects right across the Sound, and would then gradually transition over to the Swedish dialects we know in the real world. The Jämtland region in Sweden would play a similar role as a transition region between the more Norwegian and more Swedish dialects. Scandinavian is also spoken much further south in Jutland and Schleswig. In the real world, after Prussia conquered it in a war against Denmark, the language shift there accelerated. In this scenario, the language shift is halted and reversed when the region is fully integrated into Scandinavia, as Scandinavian replaces German as the main language in commerce and local government. With Scandinavian covered, I'll quickly mention other notable languages. To the east of the nation in Finland, Finnish is of course spoken, the main difference here being that the Karelian language from the real world is in this scenario a dialect of Finnish. In southern Jutland there is also a notable German-speaking minority, who total around 100,000. They only make up a majority in the very southernmost regions of Jutland, but also exist as a minority group further north. In the far north, there's also a small population of Sami speakers, numbering just under 100,000. Across the sea in the Scandinavian territories, other languages are also present. Faroese is spoken in the Faroe Islands, Icelandic in Iceland, and the Inuit Greenlandic language is spoken by the majority of people in Greenland, although Scandinavian is also spoken there. The Scandinavian West Indies have no majority language. Many languages are present there, the most notable ones being English, Scandinavian, and Dutch. With that said, let's quickly cover the economy of Scandinavia. The United Kingdoms of Scandinavia and Finland has a GDP of just over 1.7 trillion. This makes it the 5th largest economy in Europe and 11th largest in the world. It also has a GDP per capita of around 60,000, making it one of the richest countries in the world per person, and quite similar in wealth to the United States, but ahead of most other European countries. But that's all for now. Consider becoming a member if you want to support the channel, and of course don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button if you want to see more videos like this in the future. See you next time.